no such thing as bad martial arts. You're gonna have somebody says, "Well, we're better. We study this." It's the individual. There's no such thing as bad martial art. It's just bad martial artists. So if you study and you have the spirit, then you're always going to be a great martial artist.
Hey, everybody out there, welcome back to another episode. There we go. I can talk, I promise, of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. Jeremy Lesniak joined by Darin Yee.
Yes, Darin.
Okay, Darin, got your good. Glad I had the right person. This would have been embarrassing if not. And we are recording live, I guess we can say live, from WeichiCon in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's 2025, and we may even have some people pop in live if you're not part of the Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. That's how you get in on that. This episode, as well as all the episodes we're doing here this weekend, are sponsored by Kataro. And this episode will drop in October 2025. And if you're watching, you see the backside, the pink side of this belt, Kataro, because they do great stuff, and that's why we love working with them. Half of the profits of all of their breast cancer related items are going to breast cancer research, like the black and pink belt, which I will be wearing this weekend because it's a great thing to be able to support those charities. Well, let's talk about you now.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. There are so many ways we can start. I don't even know. I don't know. Where should we start? How should we start this conversation?
Well, one of the things that I always begin telling people is that martial art is not the kind of thing that a lot of people think of nowadays. See, in the old days, the history of martial art is very different than what people think. And the problem with martial arts is that everybody is an expert.
Especially people who've never done it.
Yes. And like, for instance, one of the things I mentioned to people is that martial art is, in the old days when it started in China, it wasn't rich people that study, it was the poor people that study. Rich people didn't need to learn it because they hired the poor people to fight for them. So nowadays, all rich people study. In the old days in China, there really was no martial art school per se. There was security agencies. There was a purpose to study. So this is why there was so much competition in martial art in those days. It was all about money. So instead of hiring somebody else, you should hire my firm because we are the best martial artists. And so there was always competition between the schools. And a lot of people don't realize that. As far as history goes in martial arts, I know there's a lot of people that will write, well, I spoke to this person or that person, I know the true story. But the truth is that we would never know the truth. And I tell a lot of people that legend in time becomes history. You tell somebody something often enough and they believe it. And I teach a very different martial art than most people. There's a lot of teachers that say, you learn from me. I'm the best person out there. There's nobody better. And a lot of teachers beat up their students to let the students know that. Whereas when I teach my students, I intentionally, while I'm sparring, leave openings so I can get hit. And I tell them very good job. And I think that teachers who really teach, if their students don't exceed who they are, they're not really doing a great job. So my idea about teaching is not to have your student think that you can intimidate them, but you want your student to think that there is no higher up. Everybody's equal. When we're born, and I don't know if you're religious, but I think that God gave everybody different assets. No one person is superior to another person. Whatever you're better at, I could be better than you at something else. So I feel martial art is life. Okay. And whatever I know or what I can do better than you, there are always things that you do that's better than me. So when I go to bow to my students, whenever they bow, I always bow back because respect has to go both ways. If you were my student, you couldn't learn from me if you didn't respect me. And as a teacher, I wouldn't teach you enough if I didn't respect you. So I feel that when we come in the bow, respect has to go both ways. I think a lot different than a lot of teachers, and I teach very differently than a lot of teachers.
I think a lot of teachers, I think most teachers would agree with what you're saying, but I don't know that they all do it. I don't know that they're all putting it into practice.
Yeah, well, it has to be, and if anybody put themselves on a pedestal and say that you will never reach my level, then you're not a good teacher. Martial art has to evolve. Everything's evolved. You look at Wei Jiru, the way Kanbun brought it over from China. He only had 3 katas. It developed into 8. And now they're adding a super rempe in there. They're calling it the lost kata. And I don't think that's true. When you learn something that your original teacher teach you, then that's a style. Anything that is taught above and beyond that, it's always good to know more, but you can't say that this is his style. You can say I add to it. Wei Jiru is Wei Jiru. Kanbun called it Pongainun, right? So he was teaching Pongainun, which, I'm not sure what language it is, but in Cantonese, Bon means half, Ngan means hard, Ngun means soft. So they call it Bon Ngan Ngun. So Pongainun is a pretty good imitation of, white people speaking Chinese. So I think that's pretty good.
That's probably as likely an explanation as any.
Yeah, and my problem is when you look at so many people practice Wei they are so stiff and it's so tight that how is that half hard, half soft? Nobody's ever seen a statue hit anybody, right?
That's true.
So if you're extremely hard, you can't move freely. So if you can't move freely, how are you the best that you're gonna be if you're always so stiff?
Well, why do you think people gravitate towards half of the style and not the other half?
It's simplicity. Something that's hard, that's strong. I go straight forward and plow through everybody. Soft needs positioning. It needs timing. It needs a development of skill. With power, all you need is strength. Even in the progression of Chinese weapons, when you learn Chinese weapon, the first weapon that most Chinese martial artists schools will teach you is a dan do. Dan means single, do is the knife. We call it the broadsword now. It's a hard weapon. When you go to block, you need 2 different points. When you hold just the handle and somebody hits this top of the sword, it comes back at you.
Right. This is the flexible sword.
Yes. You need to hold the back dollar in order to block with it. So it's a hard weapon because you're using hard movement. The second weapon that they go into is the stick. The stick is another hard weapon. You beat people with the stick. You block, and you have 2 points, your right and your left hand, right? The next one is a spear. The spear is a soft weapon. Now you're going into something that's more skillful. It's further along. It becomes soft, hard and soft. A spear. You can't beat somebody with a spear because you're going to break the spear. You thrust. And you can't block directly with a spear, although you can between the 2 hands. But the front part of it, you divert, so it's now hot and soft. The most skillful weapon is the sword. The sword is double-edged. You can't hold part of it because you'll cut your fingers or your hand off. So you have to softly, when somebody strikes, guide the weapon away. You can't slam it because it doesn't have the strength. Your wrist isn't strong enough to when you hit the front of the sword to hold it back. So you have to use the sword to guide the weapon. If you look at any of the old pictures of Chinese martial arts, like the generals and the soldiers, all the soldiers use the dando out in the field because it's a hard weapon. It's simplicity. Then you have the only people you see with the swords are the heavy clad, fancy dressed people because the sword requires skill. So you go from hard, where you don't need as much skill, to where you become skilled, and then you use the soft weapon rather than a hard weapon. So, in my opinion, that's my opinion only, right? But I believe that that's the process of learning. You go from hard weapons, where is something that's more simple, to something that's more difficult, which is soft, which now requires timing, skill, right? Patience of learning. And I think the problem with most of our martial artists is that simplicity is what they're interested in. And my problem is people are now studying for rank instead of studying for skill. And, this is why, years ago when I actually left the organization because I didn't want to teach, because nobody wants to spend the time to develop skill. And even now, you look at some of the high-ranking people, everything's grunt, right? All power. And I don't knock it, don't get me wrong. Something that's simple is easy to learn, easy to use, easy to teach. Something that requires more skill, now it becomes a little more difficult, and it requires an immense amount of training, right? So right now, a lot of the things that people learn, they go to the inside. When you see them block, they block on the inside. But when you're on the inside, you're not matching power. Because when you go to punch, I have to come against your power, try to fight it. Where soft, when you punch, I move to the outside and I guide the punch away, which requires a little more skill. It requires me to learn how to dance.
Sure.
I need how to learn how to move. You ever see Muhammad Ali box?
Yeah.
Sometimes they make fun of him, say he has his hands down. But Muhammad Ali has such great timing, great speed, and great shift moving the legs. It's hard to hit him even if he didn't have his hands up right. So I think to become a great martial artist, you have to learn soft. And when you talk to people, what is soft? You get people say, well, it's in the breathing. Well, every living thing breathes. Are they also masters of karate because they know how to breathe?
Probably not.
No.
I wouldn't say.
So it's not in the breathing, but people have a tendency to believe that, and I don't argue. The movements that we have in waging rule, and the reason why I talk about waging rule is I studied Kung Fu for 10 years before I started waging. But I find waging rule to be one of the most effective systems that I was trained in. My brother studies Shotokan, and I worked out with him. And I think Shotokan's a great art. But the thing is, Shotokan is a grunt, heavy, strong art. And I think Weiji Rule, it leaves a lot in interpretation. You have to interpret the move. The problem is there's two types of people that study. There's students and there's practitioners. Most practitioners do what the teacher tells them. And most teachers love that because it makes them everything they teach to be valid. And this is what it is. But as I mentioned before, when we're born, God gave each of us different assets. Some of us are bigger and stronger. Some of us are quicker, and some of us not so bright. So the important thing is we have to learn to be who we are. To become a master, you have to look at the movements that you learn and master those movements for yourself. Not to do what you teach me, because I'm not you. Maybe I'm not as strong as you. I'm not as fast as you. So I have to look at these movements. How do I master these movements of who I am? I remember when I was teaching in Cuba, and the person on
Hold on. When you were teaching in Cuba,
well, I teach all over the world. I teach in the UK.
I don't think we've had anybody else on the show who's taught in Cuba. Keep going, but I'm going to ask you questions about that when you're done.
And Northern, that's the guy who was leading the organization in Cuba, says, Sensei, look, he says, I do everything just like you. And I said, Northern, I would appreciate to see how you do things like you, not like me. Because in order to master the system, to be who you are, I like to see what works for you. Now I can learn from you.
So that's the student versus the practitioner.
Yes, the student, see, a practitioner will practice what they're being taught. A student is going to be a knucklehead like me, who's like, when you go to teach me something, the three things I tell everybody is you got to learn how to dissect, take all the movements and take it apart, analyze them. So you dissect and you analyze. What is each movement and what does it do and what can it do? And then you experiment with it. Because I could think something would work that way, and then you find out it doesn't work very well. So when you listen to another sensei teach you something, you say, yeah, that's the way to do it. And when somebody teaches you something different, you say, no, that's my sensei is right. That's the wrong attitude. The right attitude is to find out how he does it and then learn what works for you. So you have to be able to dissect, take everything apart. You have to analyze all the movements and how they work. And then you're going to make sure by experiment. I tell a lot of teachers who teach, who learned to teach, and I said, you have to teach responsibly because what you teach is long lasting. It'll take a long time if it doesn't work for somebody for that to dissipate and have something else work. You never teach a student something that only works for you because your student is not you. You have to be able to teach different versions of different things. So let the students become who they are and not who you are.
I fully agree with what you're saying. And it's how I was raised in karate. But I've learned from doing the show and all the things that we do and traveling around and training in other schools that it's not every school that looks at martial arts in this way. Does this philosophy come from your time in Kung Fu?
Well, I think because of my 60 years of training. And when I was studying White Crane, there's certain movements that they use. And like we have this version of Charlie Foot. Charlie Foot is what they used to teach in the Chinese army. It's very much like Taekwondo. It's aggressive movement of beating your opponent to death, right? Very little concentrations put into blocking. They have a point so, point pow, point come, point chop. The point is the brush and then the other movements. But they don't teach you a lot about defense, about blocking. So I call that like a suicide act. You go and do your best to beat your opponent to death before they beat you to death. Right? Weiji rule in our Waoki block that we teach they teach us circular movements.
Mhm.
You say to an instructor, well, how would you use that? He said, well, when you go around, you collect it. You're completely covered. Then I said, well, let's use a little bit of science because there's no such thing as magic. You don't learn a couple of tricks and then you beat everybody up. You have to find out how it works, right? So if you go to punch me, your arm being 2.5 feet long, maybe 3, could reach, then you got to step in order to hit, right? So you're going to throw a punch at me that only takes like 3 to 4 feet to hit me. If I make this full circle and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I could go 5 feet to block a 3-foot punch. The math doesn't work out. So I created what we call a Waoki Bonkai, which we take these movements. So this is number 1, number 2, number 3. I drop in number 4, number 5, number 6. I break it down in 6 different parts. So no matter how somebody punches at you, it doesn't take that long to block. If it takes you 3 feet to punch me, I should only move 2 to 3 inches to block you. Because when you go to punch, by the time you get here, then it registers, hey, you're throwing a punch. By the time I go to block you, it's too late. I end up getting hit. But if my hand was up, you go to punch and you're right about here. All I have to move is inches. If you have to move more than inches, that nanosecond it goes from here to here, you're going to get hit.
Right.
So you have to learn how to dissect the Waoki, all the little movements in it, and put it to good use. And that's what I did. I created the Waoki Bonkai. And there's a lot of teachers that I go to there, told you to teach, they record it. So they're using, which is a good thing because we don't want everybody thinking. The first thing I ask is, how many people here are wage rule students? And everybody puts their hand up. I said, how many of us spot? Everybody puts their hand up. And I said, how many of us use the Waoki? And then they'll look at each other and I'm saying, well, why don't you? Isn't that 50% of your style? We do a Waoki before we do a Shogun, right? We do a Waoki before we do a rich hand. You do the Waoki before you do a Nukate. Yeah. You even do a Waoki before you throw a kick. So if you don't use the Waoki, that's 50% of your system. Why would you do that? Why would you do something that you don't use and you can't use? I think the important thing is to break that down, to find out how to use it. Because it's irrational to do something that you're not going to do.
So if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, we talked about kind of lost information. And one of my theories is that anything that's fundamental in a style was put there with intent. So if you're talking about this Waoki, this circular motion as a defensive motion being so fundamentally important, what changed or maybe I can be lazy and say went wrong in how it was passed down that it's not being used in that way?
Well, I think, and I really believe this to be true, that with each generation of students, something gets lost.
Sure.
A lot of us do not study enough before we go to teach. Right? And if you don't really learn enough of it, you don't fully understand it.
I would agree.
You know, I watch a lot of people spot, and then I can tell if anybody ever fought. You really can't be a successful instructor about fighting if you never fought. If you don't go out there and fight, then you're not a fighter. Martial art is the art of fighting. How can you teach something that you've never done? I grew up in the ghettos. I was born in the south end of Boston. It is at that time, right now, a lot of rich people live there now, but when I tell people I was, I lived in the south end, well, oh, you had a lot of money. No, I lived there when we were poor. We didn't have anything. There was fights every single day. Fight was a necessity. This is one of the reasons I studied karate, right? Because I didn't want to get beat up all the time. So, I like to believe that I train so I don't have to fight. So when you have that confidence, sometimes that confidence glow within you. So when somebody wants to fight and you talk your way out of it, it's not because you're a coward. It's because you never get in the fight unscathed. Nobody gets in a fight and come out and say, I kicked his butt and I didn't get hurt. That just, people's vanity. Anytime you get in a fight, you never walk out unscathed. And so I'd rather not fight. I remember I was in college with drinking age was 18 when I was in college. I'm old. So somebody wants to, it's getting a little loud. And, I said, I really don't want to argue with you. I said, how about if I buy you a beer? I said, I buy him a beer. We're no friends. Right? There's no fight. At beer at that time, well, I'm old. It's like $1.50, right? So I buy him a beer for $1.50. There's no fight.
Even a nice a fancy beer today at a upper end bar, I'll pay $10
Yeah.
to not get into a fight every time.
Yeah. So why fight? And I think a lot of people don't get in fights. They go, oh, shoot, I could have done this and I could have done that. So I paid $1.50 so I don't have to get in a fight. And then you get people who says, yeah, I would have kicked his butt. I would have. You never know. Like I said, God only gave us so much, right?
Who has a knife? Who has
Yeah.
a gun? How many friends does he have?
It's not even that. No matter how strong you are, how good you are, you can't beat who you can't hurt, right? I can hit somebody as hard as I want, but if I can't hurt them, and this is the problem with people studying martial arts. They think I'm studying martial art, I'm going to be able to kick the crap out of everybody, and that's not true. And that's the wrong way to think. I've been studying since I was 8 years old. I'm 74 now. And with all that martial art, I still don't believe I can beat everybody. I don't believe I can beat anybody. I'm much better than I used to be. But to say I'm better than anybody else, I'm fooling myself. And I don't think people should fool themselves. Yeah, I'm a better fighter than I used to be. But to say that I'm better than anybody, you can't say that, right? And I ask a lot of my students that come to learn, why are you here? If he says, oh, I want to be able to beat this guy up, and I say, you don't belong in school. That's not what I teach you to do. I teach you how to fight. I can tell you that I'm going to help you be a better person. Hopefully, a better person means I don't have to fight. I can help you become a stronger person. But I can't guarantee you're going to beat everybody. And I train a lot different than other people. Whereas in America, everybody works for power. But you can't hurt who you can't hit. I train everybody for speed. Because if I'm not fast enough to hit you, no matter how much I try to hit you, I'm never going to be able to hit you if you're that much quicker than me. So I train specifically on speed because along with speed and your exercises comes strength. I'll give you a good example. Bruce Lee, probably one of the hardest hitters that I've ever seen, right? He weighs 120, 130 pounds. Where's his mass? You rely on science, right? You hit with force. What is force? Mass times acceleration. That's just a simple formula.
Right.
There's a lot of factors to it, but the important thing is mass times acceleration. So when we train, I always ask my student to be thinkers. When you use a technique, use something to hit. What is mass? And what is acceleration? What in what you just did requires more mass? and what requires more acceleration. Some people think, I'm big and powerful, I hit you on the. Okay, let me give you a good example. Your front kick, powerful kick, really quick, comes in and out. You're going to hit somebody, and I call that a strong kick, a hard kick, because it's linear. When you go to kick, you have the weight of your body behind that kick. When you hit, you have the mass, and rely on mass. Now, if you take a roundhouse kick and you come around to the side, where is the mass? There's not much. It's just your body and the weight of your leg. It's the acceleration that makes the roundhouse kick powerful. So what is more powerful, the roundhouse kick or the front kick? The roundhouse kick.
For most people, yeah.
But that's not the hard kick. The hard kick is your front kick because you got your mass behind. So it's mass times acceleration. This is my acceleration, and my mass is for my body. When you take a roundhouse kick, the mass is just your foot and your leg. The acceleration is what gives you the power. So when you go to study martial arts, it's an art, it's a science. Understand the science. Not just say, well, you do this and do this, and that's what I'm going to hit you, I'm going to be able to hurt you with that. Understand the science. What in it that gives you the power, right? And that's what makes a student. Someone who takes things apart and says, I could become stronger and better than who I am because I understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it to make it more powerful. But if I go to teach you, I'm going to ask you, how do you feel, right? Do you feel more powerful this way? Do you feel more powerful that way? I remember the Okinawans teaching us about Sanchin. They says it's toe to heel, right? And your front foot come out a little bit like that. I don't teach like that.
No.
I ask people, how far should your foot be? Everybody says toe to heel. I says, really, you feel balanced that way? So when they practice in the kata and the sanchin, I would say to them, how's your balance? I don't say, are you toe to heel? I said, how do you feel? How's your balance feel? Now, I tell people how far you step, how far your foot goes. You learn how to do that before you're even 1 year old. Why? Because you learn how to walk. When you go to step, you got to put your foot down before you fall. You learn how far you can step before you need to put your foot down. That's what you got to do with your fighting. What is the difference? You get your foot up. You got to have your foot step down before you lose your balance. Everything's about balance. How wide do you go? They said, well, you go a little small, I don't tell my students that. I said, go side to side. How does your balance feel? He goes, well, I feel I'm going on the side of my foot. I said, spread your legs out a little bit until you feel you're on the flat of your feet. But I don't tell them a specific amount to go because I'm not him. And the best teacher is not me. The best teacher is you. Nobody knows you better than you. So when I go to teach people, I tell them, how does that feel? You feel balanced forward and backwards? Do you feel balanced side to side? Find the balance. You don't want to go out too wide because now it leaves you open. You want to go out as far as you need to with being balanced without opening yourself up. When you do your blocks, you don't want to do too big of a block. Are you blocking for the guy next to you? Or are you blocking for yourself? So your block should only be the width of your body and not way out here. Where you blocking, who you blocking. When you come down and block in a lot of the ways you root people, they go sideways. But your body's not meant to go sideways. That's why so many people have bad shoulders. Your body's meant to come out. So when I block, I'm meant to go sideways. I come down and I push out. And then my hands stop. I want you to feel that. Go like this. It's stop without you having to stop it. But if it goes sideways, you have to stop it where you want it to be. and you can feel a strain on your shoulder. If there's a strain, then it's unnatural. If it's natural, you don't feel a strain.
So you use that word. Let me ask you before you go on, because I have my theories on this. Do you believe all martial arts techniques should be based on natural movement?
That's right.
Okay.
If it
We
is,
agree then.
if it isn't natural, it isn't what you're supposed to do. Okay. So I tell people when they're doing the kata, I want you to feel comfortable when you're doing your kata. If you're not comfortable, then you're fighting yourself before you don't even need to fight somebody else. You're already fighting yourself, right? You want to be comfortable. When you do your Aoki, people come back with their hands, they pull way back. I said, do you feel a little strain? Yep. He goes, that's fine. I said, why are you straining yourself? Bring the hand back to where you're comfortable. When you're doing your kata, you shouldn't be uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, you're really pushing yourself too much. So I teach a lot different than everybody else. I want you to be as natural and as comfortable, as fast as you can be, right? Because you want to gain strength, lift some weights. Weights are not bad for you. A lot of people say, well, karate people shouldn't lift weights to get bulk. And muscles are not bad. Muscles are always good for you. You know what else muscle does? Muscle doesn't have any nerves, have no pain. There's no such thing as a muscle ache. It's the nerves around your muscles, I've heard. There's no such thing as bad muscles. So when you gain muscle, it's not a bad thing. You just have to continue your flexibility, allow gaining your muscle, learn how to be flexible with the muscles. So, I train a lot different than a lot of other people. The other thing too is understand that the philosophy. All Asian arts is philosophical. There's something behind it. And when teachers teach, they say you do this first, you do that second. I named them. Like if I was teaching, say, a kata like Conchiwa, right? I say 3 turn block punches. So you do the first block, second block, then I'll say 2 side kicks. You go through the first side kick. If I said, otherwise I'll say, well, do this. The next move is this. You don't remember that. You just try to remember the move.
Right.
But if I have you recite your moves, it's in here.
What?
So you recite it. And that's how I teach. I want to make sure that you continue to practice, right? And then that you don't forget it, but if you recite the movements. So I learn a lot of different ways to teach. I used to visit a lot of different karate schools and then watch the teachers teach. I try to pick up good things they have and things that I don't think they should do. I try to avoid it. But I'm not the kind of person who would tell somebody what's right or wrong because I'm not them, right? I try to do what's right for me. And when somebody do something and I don't know if I want to do that, I don't argue with them. Like sometimes when I teach somebody, no, I don't do that. I do this. What was wrong for them to say that? When I look at somebody do something that I wouldn't do, I would never say, you don't do that. I'm not you. I don't know why you do it. I don't know how effective that is for you. And that's why I would never contradict what you do. See, you have to have that respect for the other person. When somebody's doing something that it's not you, that you don't do, you have to respect what he does. Maybe it works for him. I have no right to tell you, don't do that. That's not right. I always ask my students if they do something that I think is something I wouldn't do. I said, well, does it feel good doing that? Try this. How's that work for you? How's this work for you? And they try and they goes, well, do whatever you feel right to it. And I'll leave. But I will never say that's wrong. You can't do that. I never tell anybody anything's wrong because you're not them. So you can't tell them that's wrong.
I agree. What about when someone's new? What about if someone comes in, they're very early in their martial arts career? I assume you do it a little differently.
Well, Sensei Matson taught me a lot. I find him to be one of the best teachers I've ever been. you get a lot of people, and I don't want to mention names, but they claim to be some of the best teachers, but they cherry pick the best students in the school. Say, I'm going to teach this school and teach that school. A good teacher is someone who takes somebody, anybody, and try to make that person the best that he's going to make. Sensei Matson takes everybody, he teaches everybody, and every one of his students becomes the best that they're going to be. That's a good teacher. Someone who cherry picks and say, yeah, they're my student, they do awesome. And he said, yeah, I'm the teacher. You're taking credit for the student who works out hard. My students do fairly well. And I thank them for making me look good because they said, Sensei, you do a good job at teaching. It ain't me. I'm not the one that work hard to become a good student. The student becomes who they are because of the effort they put in. I just try to help them along by showing them different things to do. Every teacher can do that, okay? But it takes a student to become a good martial artist. So I try never to take credit. I just sit there with a big smile on my face and go, yeah, he's doing really well. That's good. And, you know, it's not about you, it's about your students. When you go to train, you want to be the best that you can be. And when you can attain so much to a level where you can't go any higher, then you try to absorb as much knowledge as you can. Because when you teach a student, you don't teach them one way. You try to teach them multiple ways and let that student pick the way that he wants to do it. That's why when I teach, try to teach as many different ways as I can. When somebody else has something else to teach and I don't know it, I learn what they have to teach. And then I try to incorporate that and show my students so they have another option. Not that I'm good at whatever it is that I just thought of. Maybe somebody else was good at it. Just give him another option to be a good teacher, to help your student to be the best that they can be. I would never contradict anybody else's techniques because I'm not them. And even when you go to promotions, right, you sit at a promotion board. Sometimes we have 5, sometimes 7 people there. And one guy in the promotion board will stand up and goes, well, that was great. You passed, I passed you, but you can do this, you can do that. And I never do that. I'm thinking to myself, you're not his teacher. You shouldn't be telling him what to do. You should see when I go to promotion, I write things down on what I think could be an improvement. And I give it to his teacher to look and let him decide. He can say, oh yeah, we can do that. But no, my students will fine, throw it away. That's fine. I'm not offended. What I wrote down was my opinion. It's his student. It's up to the sensei to teach the student. I would never go up and tell a student how to do something to contradict his teacher. So when people pass the test, I would say, congratulations, you did a great job. And I sit down. It's not like people say, well, damn, don't want to tell people how to do that. It's not my place to do that. I'm not a teacher. And I don't want to confuse the student. So what I do is I write my recommendations down, I give it to the teacher. He reads it, and if he likes it, he'll use it. If he don't like it, just file it in the wastebasket. But for all these guys that go down and says, well, you should do this, you should do that, I just sit there and shake my head and say, well,
There's an element of arrogance in giving correction in that way, isn't there? Because what if that person, you as you've said a number of times, you don't know what's going on with that person. What if there's some kind of physical anomaly? What if
yeah,
there's, an injury? What if there's prior training? What if
yeah.
there's so many what
Yeah,
ifs?
well, I ask the teachers in the tests if there's anything we should know about the student
Sure.
before they come up. But the thing is, you're there to say that is he sufficient for the rank that he's tested for? You're not there to teach him to go to the next level. It's not your job. He's not your student. So and so a lot of people think, well, a lot of times they go and they think I don't know anything because I didn't say anything. But again, it's not my place.
Right.
See, if I teach a seminar, I'll teach things. But the first thing I tell everybody is your teacher is teaching what's right. I'm just adding to things that you can consider, right? Don't ever think that what I teach you exceeds what your teacher is teaching you. I'm just teaching you another idea to give you different thoughts to go by. So it's respect for the student's teaching. You never try to change the way anybody do things. You can give your opinion, and I don't want to swear, but everybody has opinions. Like every opinion stinks,
Yes.
right? And the thing is, you can give your suggestions, and when I go to teach, I never say I'm here to teach you. I'm here to share with you. See, I don't use the word teach. Because if I teach you, I expect you to learn it and be able to do it. I'm sharing with you. If you like it, then you adapt. Most people, if they like what you teach, they'll learn it. If they don't like what you teach, they don't pay much attention, they won't learn. And it's okay. You're not their teacher. You have no right to say that you need to learn this. I go there and says, well, I come here to share some of the things that I learned about this, and I'm going to share it with you. And I share.
And that changes the way that you present information, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because once I realized that I could not make someone learn.
Yeah.
I could offer them information, but I couldn't, no matter what I did, I couldn't stuff that information into their brain.
Yeah.
They had to be willing.
Yeah.
So now I see my job when I'm in the front of the room, whether it's a seminar or my classes, is to motivate my students to want to learn what I am sharing with them.
Yeah, and I don't use the term teaching.
You don't?
No, I always use the word sharing with you on some of the things I learned because they're not my student. If they were my students, I'm going to teach you.
Okay.
But I'm going to teach, and I let them know I'll teach you multiple ways, right? And I want you to learn all three, even though you might not use it, because you might become a teacher, and you like to have those ideas to be able to share with your students, right? And the thing is, a lot of people don't do that, and a lot of the movements loses translation through time. That's why I call it the evolution of the art. There's a lot of things that, I tell people, some of the things that we do in Weiji Rule, that Kanbun Weiji, who originally brought it over from China, might not recognize it, say, what the heck is that, right? Because it's evolved. But did it evolve for the better? That depends on the individual, right? So I'm never going to say, no, it didn't evolve for the better. I'm just going to say there was more taught to it. But then if you don't know enough to allow your students to be who they are, and then your students got to be a mini you, then I think the teachers lack some understanding of individualism.
Andrew and I talked about this, and I think we did a whole episode on it, that if your goal is to turn your students into you, they're never going to get there. They'll never be you, as you said, they have different gifts. And so you're dooming them to be less than they could be.
And then when they go to teach, they'll do the same thing.
So it gets worse.
It gets worse. So the way I'm teaching, I'm hoping to get them to engage the thinking about how to improve the system, and we can advance. Now, Sensei Madsen made me the president of IUKF. Not that I wanted to be. I'd rather spend my retired year playing golf. But Sensei Madsen realized that I have a lot that I can try to persuade people into learning more about the soft, because the hard's the elementary part. It's all the grunt and power plowing right through people. Soft part needs timing of the punch, position is so I can counter, right? And I need to practice to have that skill incorporate. So I push people more toward the soft aspect so they become more skilled. Hopefully, they can teach more of that. if you look at so many of the people who study Wei Ching, they're stiff. They don't look bored. I remember Joe Louis came down to one of our camps down Cape Cod. He looked at me and goes, "You're not Wei Ching." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Your kata actually looks good."
That is a huge compliment from a man who was not a fan of kata.
Yeah. He says, "Your kata actually looks good." Then he goes, "You want to buy one of my books?" I go, "No." He says, "It looks like you're teaching out of one chapter of my book," because he's watching me teach a seminar. I goes, "If I'm already teaching out of a chapter of your book, why do I need your book?" He goes, "Well, I'll give you one." I said, "No, it's all right, Joe." I said, you print those books to sell." I said, so what he did was he signed one and gave it George's wife, gave it to Susan. He goes, "When I leave, give it to Darren." So after he left, Susan says, "Oh, Joe Louis left us for you." Oh, gee, thanks. I says, I should have bought it from him. I didn't want to take his book and not pay him for it.
One of the things, small tangent here, we've had a number of people on the show who trained and earned black belts from Joe Louis, and one of my good friends, Dennis, spent many years training with him, and I never had a chance to meet him. He passed before we started doing this. But I will say one thing that I'm very confident in saying. If Joe Louis didn't think well of you, he would not have left you that book. And that is, Andrew, would you agree? That's pretty darn high. Yeah, Andrew's off camera nodding. Extremely high praise.
Oh, thank you.
Because we both have had the chance to train with Bill Wallace, who of course was Joe Louis's best friend.
Joe's an excellent martial artist. I mean, I talked with him. He is so knowledgeable, right? And he goes, "I didn't think of that." He goes, "That's good." And then he started explaining how he thought. And, I sat at lunch with him and talked to him. And I didn't know. I always thought he was this big, powerful guy who just beat the crap out of everybody because he was so big. But as I'm talking to him, I realize how knowledgeable he is. So when somebody says, "Well, yeah, he's a big guy," he goes, "No, you really don't. You don't know Joe Louis, right? I don't know him. I only met him that one time at camp, and just from being the first time talking to him, I said, this man is really knowledgeable about martial arts." Right?
He was. I don't think he ever would have used the term nerd for himself, but from what I understand, he was very interested in understanding things and improving them and not being trapped by tradition.
Yeah, no, and we were talking about different movements. He goes, "That's right out of boxing." I said, "Joe, I used to box." I box too. So yeah, it's amazing what a great martial artist he was, and I never realized that about him. He was super. And I brought a kung fu teacher from China because when I went to teach, I didn't want to confuse people with the way I was teaching. So I had him teach some of the same movement, but different ideas. Because back in the early 80s, I used to go train in China, like once or twice a year. I used to fly back to China. I trained in Toisan. I trained in Guangzhou. I trained in Fusan, and I got to meet a lot of the masters there. And on the way back, I fly into Narita to fly down to Nash to visit Okinawa. But I still maintain my kung fu roots, regardless of the fact that I think the world of Wei and I I've learned so many forms that I can't remember half of them. It's tough being old. But my brother studied Shotokan, I studied the Heian and the Pinyons with him, and then I wanted the flexibility to kick like the Taekwondo people, so I studied with Sik Chung in Cambridge, Massachusetts, learning how Taekwondo stretch. So I learned all the kicking, and then I met a couple of my friends studied judo and jujitsu, and I studied with Ziggy down at BYMCU down in Boston. to study judo and jiu-jitsu, but I just didn't have enough time for everything. So I studied judo and jiu-jitsu for about a year just to learn some of the basics. I was still a white belt, but I got to get some of the basics from them. And then I work with a man named Val Boss in Boston. That happened to be his name, Val Boss, great boxing coach. And I trained with him at the Huntington YMCA for about 6, 7 months. While I was there, there were some Muay Thai people there. So I trained Muay Thai with them. Yeah, it was to a point that we even bought a condo in Bangkok, so you can go there and train, have a place to live. Yeah, so martial art is martial arts, right? How many different ways is there to hit somebody? There's no such thing as bad martial arts. You're gonna have somebody says, "Well, we're better. We study this. That's better than that." It's the individual. There's no such thing as bad martial art, just bad martial artists, right? So if you study and you have the spirit, then you're always going to be a great martial artist. We talk about the mind, body, and spirit. Your mind learns the art, all right? Your body trains in it, okay? Your spirit keep you going. When you get older, your mind has a tendency to forget. Your body loses the energy and the power and the flexibility you used to have, but the spirit is infinite. I say to people, when I was like 60 years old, I'm now 74 now, but at 60, I'm not as strong as I used to be when I was 30. Do I lose my rank? Why do I keep getting promoted higher and higher? It's not that I'm a better fighter. As a matter of fact, I'm not as strong and as fast as I used to be. So why am I maintaining my rank and getting promoted higher? Because of my spirit. Because your spirit is infinite. You can't break this. You can lose your mind, you can lose your physical ability, but you always have your spirit. So people who continue to train, I have the greatest respect in the world for people getting to an older age, but they continue to train. I'll even mention somebody's name. I don't like, but Marjorie Swift, she passed away, but she trained and she rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. That she was but she used to come online to work out with me because I teach Monday 1 to 6, and I teach Europe. I teach people all over the world, and they come in the reason why it's 1 to 6 is 1 o'clock is their nighttime. They get out of work and they can work out online. And Marjorie had cancer. She died of cancer. So, but while she had chemo, she wore a scarf because she put on her gi and she came on to work out. That spirit. How do you not respect somebody like that?
Yeah.
How can you take anything away from anybody who has that much spirit? She's an older lady. She don't have the strength and the vitality she did when she was younger. And people used to say, Margie ain't strong anymore. You know what? She's still a great martial artist. All these years she's trained, she continued training. And even while she had chemo and wasn't feeling as well as she should, she still put on a gi and come and work out because of her spirit, right? So you can't knock people like that. But as far as people studying martial art and want to be fighters, you got to fight. It's like learning how to drive a car. You know where the steering wheel is. You know where the gas is. You can even know how to switch your gears. And step in the clutch. But unless you get behind that wheel and drive that car, you are not a driver. You can learn everything you can about punching and kicking. You don't practice fighting, then you're not a fighter. I don't care how fast and how strong you are. If you don't really fight, you don't have the timing. You don't have the precision. You don't know what it's like to get hit. What did Mike Tyson say? Everybody has a plan to get punched in the face, right? Then what happens? And that's why Kentucky is good, but you don't exceed it. because you have to know your body's limit. So many people train in Kentucky, they pound and beat the crap out of themselves. But if you learn correctly, your Kentucky should not hurt you. Because right now, everybody blocks with their bones. You're not supposed to block with your bones. Block with your muscles. If I do my wauki, you go to punch, I block, I hit you with my muscle. I turn my hand so I can grab. But I don't do this and hit you with the bone. I hit you with the back. And then I turn and grab. If you do this, hit here, you hit me with the bone. And people go home with black and blue marks. Black and blue marks isn't good. That's internal bleeding. When you do training and you have internal bleeding, it's not good for you. So I tell people, you got to train responsibly. You got to understand what hurts. Block where it doesn't hurt. You don't block where it does hurt, right? And then you get people say, well, that's because you don't do katikite. You're wrong. I did it. I did it wrong. I have a limp now, right? And it's because I have pains in my leg. It comes back. I don't even know where it comes from. And that's because I'm not teaching you not to overdo it because I'm opinionated. I'm teaching from experience. I've done that. I'm trying to tell you, don't do what I did, right? Because I'm paying the price.
Because you want your students to be better.
Yes. Anybody I teach, I don't want them when they get to my age to need a cane, right? There's a couple of old agey guys that are walking with canes. I'm almost positive they damage the nerve during Kentucky. You can hurt your nerves, you leave it alone, you can recover. But if you injure your nerves, the nerves don't grow back. And you're going to be injured for life.
Yeah.
Right? And this is why you got to train responsible. And then you get idiots that says, well, I suppose you don't do it. No, I did it. I did it wrong. And that's why I'm trying to tell you, don't do what I did. There's so much to learn. And I fought my whole life. There's at least one shooting every week in the South End. People get stabbed every day. My brother became MD. He did his internship at the Boston City Hospital. He says like a triage at there. He says every day you get people with gunshots, stab wounds. Unbelievable. Comes in there, broken arms. They got to be reset. It's unbelievable how much goes on in the South End. It's now called the Back Bay. Oh, a lot of money there now. When I lived there, it was the South End. and there was fights, but we fought every day, and fighting was a necessity. So I understand a lot about fight. That's why when I teach, I try to teach people not to do it improperly and get hurt. As a matter of fact, a lot of things that I teach in Weiji are very dangerous techniques, right? Like when we block, we have this thing called a front flip. You block. I never want anybody's hand to pass the face. When that punch comes, I wedge your punch till it goes by my body. So the continuation that would go by, but I'm aiming right for your eyes. So when I block, it's here. It's block, and then I punch you in the eye. Now, if you punch with your left hand, after I block this way, I break your eyes. And it's still okay because I can do it strong that way. I'm not trying to force you around because that'll hurt my shoulder. But if I did this, your body is made to do this.
Yeah.
So you can push as much as you want and it doesn't hurt. But if you try to go sideways, you feel the pain. That's why the block shouldn't be like this. It should be straight. When it blocks straight, I'm wedging your punch past me and I go right for your eyeballs. So not only am I blocking your punch, I'm also attacking you simultaneously. So I teach people if it takes one tool, it might be too late because you got one tool. You punch with this hand, I got one, two's coming. I can't hit you.
Right.
But if I just do it in one,
Right.
then I don't allow the two to come out.
That makes sense.
So I try to train a lot of my students to block and hit simultaneously. So there's a difference. If you have experience fighting, then you realize one tool isn't the smartest thing. So you want to teach people how to hit while you attack, while you block, avoid getting hit. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll have you in a moment. I'm going to hand it back to you to sum up, to leave the audience with whatever you want to leave them with. But I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you to the folks at WeiQiCon for hosting us. And we get this room. They even named the room the podcast room for us this year, which is pretty cool. And I don't thank him a lot on camera, but thank you, Andrew, for all that you do. And remember, support Kataro and everything they're doing, KATAARO.com, WK10 to save 10% on anything they've got going on over there. And for the month of October, I don't know, we can assume they'll do it in the future too, but at least October 2025, they're going to donate half of the profits from their breast cancer products like that great belt to breast cancer research. And if you want to go deeper on what we do, whistlekick.com and whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Darin, how do we close today? What do you, I mean, we've been all over.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of great stuff. How do you want to leave it for the audience?
Well, I want to recommend that if anybody wants to study martial arts, you want to study for a purpose. And I want to ensure everybody that you have to learn for a purpose. If you say, I want to study martial art to exercise, I would say go take up dancing. A record lasts 3 minutes. You get 3 minutes of exercise, right? But if you study kata, your karate, for exercise, a kata lasts less than a minute. Do dancing. But if you really want to study, you have to realize martial art isn't learning a couple of tricks. It's hard work. It's helping yourself become stronger, keep your mind clear, right? Work on speed to help you be faster, learn about balance. Because if you don't have balance, fighting means nothing. You can't hit anybody solid because you don't have the balance, right? You need to be anchored, balanced to get forced into a punch. You have to work out hard. You have to understand. Be a thinker. Don't be a practitioner. Be a student. Study your movements. Understand why you're studying. Don't just study just to say, well, I come to study. Because all that effort and time you put in to gain your black belt, and then you leave, and then you don't do it again, everything you gain is gone. I've been studying for like 60 years now. I don't let it go away. I wake up every day thinking about martial arts. I practice martial art on a daily basis. I try to continue doing my kata. And even after 60 years, I still don't know anything. People say, well, Darin, all these years, you must be a great master. I say, no, I'm a student. Martial art is so vast, you can spend 2 or 3 lifetimes and still not become perfect or gain everything you want to learn. Keep on studying, right? I'm going to study to the day I can't move or walk anymore, because martial art is not just an exercise, it's a passion. It's my way of life. There's an old saying, I gave my life to karate, and karate gave me a way of life, right? So if you're going to study for a purpose. Don't just say, oh, I'm just doing it for fun, because there's a lot of effort you're going to put in. Okay. Do it for a purpose. Learn how to do it. Learn how to do it right. Okay. And remember, if a teacher tells you something that doesn't make sense, think about it. Make sense out of it. Okay. And if any teacher say, you ask a question and go, no, I can't tell you, it's too early. No, there's no such thing. Education is endless. He probably doesn't know the answer. Okay. Always try to learn from somebody who's not there to beat you up. And if a teacher hurts you, then he's not a good teacher. Never get hurt. Always learn for a purpose and work out hard. There's no such thing as magic. Everything is hard work. So if you're not willing to put in the effort and the time, right, go dance. Okay. Thank you very much.